We're live. Great. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are continuing the Hemp Revolution Conference with COM26. We have Tracy Ryan here today. Tracy has been an advocate for this plant for 7 years now. She started with her work with Canna Kids, helping with treatments for kids with different illnesses, and she'll tell about her story. We're going to talk about her medicinal practice and the medicinal qualities of this plant a little bit, and then policy. And we're doing this with all of the lens on how we can help the public and private and governmental sectors to adopt these practices and techniques, principles, philosophies of the hemp industry into the forefront of the future. So also, Tracy was part of a documentary, We the People, that's also on Netflix, which I haven't seen yet. I just was aware of it yesterday. It looks great. Watch the trailer. And I think you mentioned that was the only documentary that's been viewed by Congress.
That's correct. And when it comes to cannabis, we showed it at the Capitol building for members of Congress. I think it was about 2 years ago now.
Well, great. So we'll start off with telling a little bit of your story, how you got started in cannabis, and what moved you to your life work.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be here amongst all of the incredible speakers you guys have. But yeah, my story started over 7 years ago now. My little girl's 8 today, and she was diagnosed with a low-grade brain tumor at 8.5 months old. It's called an optic pathway glioma. It's a grade 1. So as the doctor told us when she was little, if you're going to get a brain tumor, this is the one you want, even though it's been a complete and total nightmare for us. The reason they said that is because this tumor has a 90 to 95% survival rate, but it has an 85% recurrence rate. So my little girl ended up in chemotherapy for 6 years. We actually have a patient that has been in chemo for 18 years since she was diagnosed around the same age. And the reason for that is because these tumors are so slow growing. The way chemotherapy works is that when it goes into the body, the cells traditionally with the more aggressive tumors are always dividing. Well, these don't divide that often. So chemo can only see dividing cells. The goal of this disease is to arrest the development of the tumor and to stop it from growing. But the disease is always in the child's brain. Once it's stabilized, whatever's there stays there. And then the hope is that it never starts growing again, but there's always that chance since the disease is still present. So it was just a few days, I would say probably under 2 weeks after Sophie's diagnosis, that we got connected to Ricki Lake from Film and Television. She was a talk show host many years ago for about 10 years. And I grew up watching her and absolutely loved her shows, loved the documentaries that she had done prior to the one that she did with us. So this was a woman that I really trusted. So when she brought us medical cannabis as a treatment for children, I was not only shocked, but a bit excited, because at that point, I had done a lot of research. Even though it had only been 2 weeks in, I literally didn't leave the computer trying to figure out ways to help my child. And through that research, I learned that only 3.8% of all government funding was actually going to pediatric cancer research, and that only 4 new drugs have now been brought to market in 40 years for children. So, I mean, we didn't have cell phones 40 years ago. So to think about the fact that these kids had no advancements in medicine, in a tumor, or in cancer just in general, that could take their lives, it was devastating. So we were looking at everything holistic. And when Ricki and Abby, her producing partner, started sending me all of this research, and my husband and I started to do our own research, we realized that there was nothing scary that we could find. And we were so confused, because why had cannabis been so demonized when we were starting to find that there were all these medicinal properties, as well as hemp? I mean, hemp was an incredible textile and huge crops back, decades ago, especially during wartime, that the industry and people at large really depended on. And if you look back in the apothecary books, decades ago, it was used for everything from pregnancy to pain to cancer to, you name it. And when Harry Anslinger and William Randolph Hearst began to really demonize this plant starting way back in the 30s, the American Medical Association came out and said, wait a minute, guys, if you make this a Schedule 1, we've got all of these conditions that we use this plant for, and we don't have medicines to replace it. But, political platforms and money and power and all that just kind of took over. And here we are today. So, we really listened to Ricky. We went to her doctors and we showed her doctors all this research, and her doctors were like, listen, if you guys seem very educated, you seem like you've really done your research, you seem like very loving, caring parents who would never do anything to hurt your child, we'll get on board with this and we'll okay it, because we didn't want to do it without their support. And at 9 months old, my daughter took her first dose of cannabis, which you see on camera in the documentary. And yes, there was THC in it. And she has been on it now for 7.5 years. And she has been such an incredible success story. And there's a few things I want to touch on as to what her successes were. The first one is, this was a tumor that the doctor said, don't expect it to shrink. If it does, it will shrink minimally at best. Also, she's going to lose all of her vision. She's going to be completely blind. There's no way to stop the growth of this tumor enough to save her vision. So prepare yourself for total blindness. And that was in itself devastating. But then our journey began, and we started using the chemotherapy alongside the cannabis, and the tumor started shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And her first 13 months on this therapy, her tumor shrank by 85 to 90%, to an extent where the doctors are like, we've never seen this before. We would like to give the cannabis. But it was the immunological response over the years that has really been what's been so incredibly profound. And I'll touch on a couple of those points just to give you examples of why we know and believe not only that it's working, but we also now have research proving why it was working that we've done with UCLA. The first thing was Sophie needed 9 blood transfusions her first 10, I'd say 9.5, 10 months of chemotherapy. I mean, her counts were just getting obliterated, and she was having transfusion after transfusion. And then one day she just stopped needing them altogether, and nothing changed. She was still getting just as much toxic chemo, same doses, same protocol. And the doctors came to us, and we didn't know that there was anything weird going on. We were just excited that she didn't need any more blood transfusions. And our doctor sat us down one day and they said, Mr. and Mrs. Ryan, unless you're doing something different, what is happening with your daughter's body is medically impossible. So is there anything else that you're giving her at home? And we said, no, just the cannabis and the chemo that you guys are giving her, and the antibiotic that she has to take to keep her from getting these terrible infections that can essentially kill her if she were to come down with one of them. And they said, well, we want to also give this credit to cannabis because we can't explain this when it comes to Western medicine. So we're like, well, what is going on here? And we kept seeing these things happen. Every time she would have a surgery, she would recover in ways that would just astound the doctors. She had pneumonia twice, showed up on the x-rays, took her into the hospital. She was admitted. They gave her 3 rounds of antibiotics. By noon, both times the next day, she was dancing in the floor of our hospital room, partying at 3 and 4 years old, because we always took little music boxes with us, speakers everywhere we went. And they would send us home with no antibiotics on board. And they couldn't call it a misdiagnosis because they could physically see the pneumonia in her lungs, but yet she wasn't presenting with pneumonia anymore. And then the most profound response was the brain tumor surgery that she had over 2 years, 2 years ago in April, which is what led us to our research at UCLA. She had the exact same brain tumor surgery when she was a baby and had barely been on any cannabis at all. At this point, she'd been on cannabis for, over 5 years, was on much, much, much higher doses consistently. They took a 4x4 piece of skull off of her, cut her from the top of her forehead down to the bottom of her ear, 7.5-hour surgery. Except for this time, instead of taking a tiny sample of tumor, they took out a whole golf ball size tumor. So it was a much more aggressive surgery. The kid came out of surgery. From the time she came out of surgery moving forward, not a single bruise on her entire face, 0 signs of visible swelling. Like if you touched right around the surgery site, you could feel a little bit of puffiness, but literally that was it. And she should have looked like she'd been in a boxing match. There's a patient that I have on social media right now, a little boy, had the same surgery. His eye is so swollen, you can't even see the pupil, and it's black. And so is the other eye, not as bad as the surgery side, but on the other eye, it's very black as well, which is typical. And the doctors came in and they're like, we have never seen this in our entire careers. What is going on? I was like, well, she's taking a ton of cannabis at home. And they're like, well, whatever you're doing, don't stop, because this is uncomprehendable. They look, he hasn't had surgery. Her surgeon came in, her main surgeon came in and said, okay, well, we're going to release her. This was hour 35. She was supposed to be in the hospital for a minimum of 3 days. When she was a baby, she was in for 5 days, which is typical for 5 days. She released her at hour 35. She was supposed to be out of school for 1 to 2 weeks. And the doctor said she can go back to school tomorrow or the next day if she wants. The kid had had a 7.5-hour brain tumor surgery. So all of this, led us to understand that there was so much more to this plant than what we were really able to wrap our minds around. And that's how Canna Kids had started. We started as a secret group. We started seeing all of these other types of responses in other children, other adults. We built a community of practitioners, of growers, of oil makers, of parents, of advocates and caregivers. And then that turned into a brand that we had for 6 years. I exited the company in August. It's now called CK Soul. And I did that so that I could continue moving research forward that we're doing now at UCLA. So that's the short version of a very long story, if you will.
Wow. It's an incredible journey. And thank you for sharing. I can't imagine. I have 2 sons of my own. I can't imagine going through everything that you went through. And kudos to you for finding this as a medicine, as a treatment, and then putting the groundwork in. I think it's pretty substantial. That this information gets out there. This plant's been demonized, like you mentioned, for so long, and been misinformation for almost 100 years. And of all the things that we looked into, medicinal is a substantial amount of illnesses that cannabis can help with. And I'd like to move into some of your research on the medicinal side of the plant, because from all my networking and research in the cannabis and hemp space, it's been linked to curing cancers. It's good for ADD. It can generate cells. It's good for skin conditions, arthritis, muscle pain, back pain. It's an anti-inflammatory, which is good for 150 different illnesses. It's good for headaches, migraines. Good for skin health, hair health. Probably, I don't know vision. I don't know anything about vision, but probably.
Seen it. Yes, I've seen people create eye drops that have done incredible things for cataracts and visual ailments as well. I think there's a lot to be said about where we can go in that arena. I don't even think that we've started to tap in, because there's so many receptors right behind the eyes. You've got these CB1 and CB2 receptors that are all throughout the body. CB1 most heavily concentrated in the brain behind the eyes. You got it in your bone marrow, your immune system stimulation, your organs. But what we have found in the research is helps explain all of this, because like you, after having worked with thousands of patients literally all over the world, a lot of our patients could only get our oils here in California, but we have serviced patients literally on all 4 corners of the globe, from basically every continent that you can think of, and it's been incredible to see what the capabilities are anecdotally to begin with. And I call them our big 3. It was cancer, autism, and epilepsy. And, when we were chatting yesterday, I was telling you about some of the things that we've seen in autism with our THCA products. And what we learned through the science, that the reason that this was working so well in children with autism is because 100% of these kids are deficient in what's called anandamide. Anandamide is your pleasure molecule, which is what it makes a lot of sense, because there's so much rage with a lot of children that are extreme on the spectrum, and a lot of behavioral disorders. And that's because they don't have this anandamide molecule to help them regulate their mood and behaviors and to help them experience joy like we do. Well, when you consume THC, guess what it turns into? Anandamide. So we had created a formulation. It was a THCA formulation. You can still get it under the CK Soul brand. And we used a variety of terpenes that were very calming. And we were seeing an over 95% success rate in mitigating a lot of these really severe symptoms in children. We were seeing kids speak for the first time. We were seeing their self-injurious behavior and rage go away. We were watching them make eye contact, saying, "I love you," for the first time, their parents. showing emotion and affection, not having the sensitivity to things on their palate. We were seeing their intestinal issues and incontinence issues going away. And it was just really profound. And then with cancer, we've seen all kinds of side effect mitigation. We've seen patients, if you watch the film, which I'm excited for you to do. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. There's a young man named AJ in the film. Canakids doesn't actually get credit for him as one of our patients because when he enters the film, Canakids in the movie hasn't yet been born. But AJ was one of our patients. He was one of our first patients. He had 90 days to live. He had metastatic osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. The young man had been in chemo for 3 years. He had never been no evidence of disease. They'd never been able to get rid of the disease in his body. He always had cancer, which was a really, really bad thing to happen with osteo. It's a very aggressive cancer. And when it continues to recur, your odds of survival go down and down and down and down. Well, this young man had 90 days to live, and they had him on Norco and Oxycontin at 16 to get out of bed, which are highly addictive opioids. And within 3 days, he was completely off of his opioids. And within 90 days, when he should have otherwise had succumbed to this disease, was completely cancer-free for the first time in his life. And his doctors could not explain what they were seeing because they literally had nothing left to give him treatment-wise. He was on a chemo called gemcitabine. And if you go and look at the research, there has been research done in animal models showing that gemcitabine and cannabinoids are very synergistic together. And the cannabis can really potentiate the effects of the gemcitabine, and the cannabinoids we now know are stimulating the immune system, which is called the natural killer cell system. It's part of your innate immune system. Well, AJ, now 6 years later, is still alive and well. He's never had a single recurrence. He's going to college, graduated high school with his graduating class, went to prom, got to do all the things that young men should be able to do. And he is grateful to be alive. And when we decided to take it one step further and move into research, it was because Sophie had that brain tumor surgery I was telling you about a minute ago. I had completely given up on Western medicine at this point. I had realized that there was nothing that they were going to give my daughter that more than likely was going to ever get rid of this disease, much less at that point stop the disease, because at this point we'd have been in chemo for years. And so I decided to really take matters into my own hands. I'd already raised several $1 million for Dr. Dedi Mieri and the Technion Institute in Israel. He's one of the world's leading researchers in the field of medical cannabis for cancer. He's also in the documentary. The Technion is a university that is one of the top universities in the world for scientific discoveries. It's a very, very well-respected institution. And we were wanting to do cannabinoid sensitivity testing in animal models with Sophie's tumor growing in it, so we understood what type of cannabis would be best for her. So I ended up landing in the lab of Dr. Anahid Jewett. She's at UCLA. She's been there for 30 years. She is the grandmother of the natural killer cell system. She discovered this cell system 30 years ago. This system, to put it into layman's terms, is like our marching army. It's the system that identifies disease in our body and eradicates it. That's why they call it the natural killer cells, because it kills the disease. It helps regulate the homeostasis in our organs and throughout our body. So when we took Dr. Jewett, Sophie's live brain tumor tissue, the day of her surgery, I was literally in the pathology room with the pathologist, separating my daughter's live tissue while she was still on the operating table, which in itself was one of those moments where you're just like, oh my God, what is going on right now? I was the first parent in the history of that hospital to get her live tissue. I fought like hell to get it and won. And we got it over to Dr. Jewett, and she implanted into not just regular mice, but humanized mice. These are mice that pump human blood. They go through a very special process that Dr. Jewett and 20 of her colleagues invented. Their immune system mirrors that almost identically to human beings, and their blood-brain barrier is the same as human beings. Now, the reason that's so significant is when you're working with a typical rodent and you go from a mouse or a rat to a human, there's an 80 to 85% failure rate in the research. And that's because we're just so genomically different. But with humanized mice, that's not the case. You're seeing a paralleled response. So what you get in the mice, you get in the humans. So it helps save years and years of research and millions, sometimes billions of dollars, because there's so many failures in science, because you think you get it right, and then you get to humans and you haven't gotten it right. So she implanted the mice, and she then started looking at Sophie's blood and her NK cells. And I was, trying to find anybody that I could find with a private plane that could help me fly these mice to Israel, so I didn't have to fly commercial with these very special. It's a $2,500 a mouse. Luckily, Dr. Jewett did all this research for me at no cost, but these are very special rodents, and the last thing I wanted to do was have anything happen to them in transport. So I was frantic. I didn't know anybody with a private jet, but I was looking everywhere to try and find one. And in that meantime, Dr. Jewett studied Sophie's blood, and she calls me up and she goes, "The mice are staying here, Tracy." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "There's no way these mice are going to Israel. They're staying here, and I need more patients." And I was like, "Okay, well, what did you find?" And she goes, "Here's the strange thing. Your daughter's 6, so she should have an immature immune system. She has a brain tumor, so her immune system her NK cells should be very broken. And I don't understand what I'm seeing, because her immune system right now is functioning 5 times better than any healthy adult I've ever studied in my 30-year career. And your child has a brain tumor, and she's on chemo. At the time, she was on 4 chemos, and she's a kid." So I was like, "Okay, that's insane." And she goes, "I'm absolutely fascinated, because there has to be something going on with these cannabinoids." So we enrolled 16 more patients, and we had AJ as one of them from the film. We had another little girl, Morgan, who is the woman is my best friend now. We've been in this since the beginning together. She had also a terminal brainstem tumor with no chance of survival. She's still alive and well today, 6 years later. We had some elderly patients. We had patients my age. We had an astronaut, which was really cool. We had a celebrity who has a brain tumor. His mother also has a brain tumor. And we started looking at patients in all various stages of disease, some on chemo, some had just started chemo, some had not started cannabis at all, some were on cannabis. So we looked at them in all different types of categories, because we wanted a really unique sample set. We didn't want to just have people that were on cannabis. We wanted to also see what it looked like prior, during, and after. And we also had patients who were off chemo, who were still just on the cannabis. And across the board, we found the same thing in every single patient. If they were not on cannabis and they had cancer, broken natural killer cells, which is what Dr. Jewett had seen in every patient for 30 years. If they'd started the cannabis, we started to see the return of this NK cell function. If they'd been on the cannabis for a while, we were seeing an immune system stronger than anything that we should see even in a healthy person. And if they were off chemo and had been doing cannabis for a long time, their immune system was through the roof. So we've now patented these findings. We moved those findings into humanized mice. And we had to use a synthetic molecule that was outside of Schedule 1. It's called Win55. And we were able to use that in humanized mice. This replicates how THC acts in the body. So we were able to navigate around the Schedule 1 regulations that big pharma, that the FDA keeps, has us locked under, because you're not able to bring cannabis into a research lab, even with profound evidence like what we had, without going through this crazy Schedule 1 process that can take, a couple of years and thousands of dollars. So we first studied the blood of patients consuming cannabis, and then we used this molecule in mice that replicate THC. And the 2 big findings that we have that will be, it's already been submitted to the medical journals. There's a big immunology journal in Europe that we submitted to. It should be published any day now, is that cannabis is turning the natural killer cell system back on. Again, it's when the system fails that we get cancer in the first place. If the system can be repaired fully, then it can help eradicate this disease. And I'll tell you why it didn't work that way with Sophie in just a minute. And then we also found, and this is the big one, that cannabis is attacking and killing cancer stem cells. That's the seeds to cancer, from which cancer gives rise, from which it grows. Chemo and radiation cannot even see these cells. So my scientist is calling this the biggest discovery in 100 years in cancer, and the biggest discovery ever in cannabis. Now, the reason Sophie has a brain tumor, even though from the neck down, her immune system works 5 times better than mine and yours, is because she has 0 natural killer cells in her brain. None. And we found that out because there was a cyst that formed once she had that brain tumor surgery. there was so much pressure that built up that we ended up having to take off 64 cc's of fluid in total, which is a lot of fluid, 14 first, and then another 50 through a surgery using what's called a neuronavigator, where they go in through the side of her face and go in and pull the fluid out of the cyst. And it was through this fluid in her brain that we realized that she had all of these really great, what's called CD8 positive T cells. Those are your fighter T cells. But without the NK cells, the T cells could only do so much, and the disease was able to recur. So Dr. Jewett, because of that, because of studying Sophie's brain, she wasn't even looking at brain cancer at the time, and she definitely wasn't looking at children. But because of that, because of studying Julian Marley's daughter, who's Bob Marley's son and Bob Marley's granddaughter, she was diagnosed with a grade 4 glioblastoma, which unfortunately she succumbed to over a year and a half ago. We got her brain fluid, found the same kind of dysfunction in her brain. And then there's another little girl whose mom's been on this journey with me for a really long time, who has a very similar type of tumor as Sophie's. It's an anaplastic astrocytoma, but it's a grade 2 instead of a grade 1. This little girl's the patient that's been in chemo for 18 years. We got her brain tissue and her fluid as well, found the same kind of dysfunction. So now Dr. Jewett has created a therapeutic for brain cancer, and we are now on a track to move that forward into human trials in the next, hopefully, coming year to 2 years. So
wow,
it's crazy. Yeah. We're first going to roll out with next week, though, believe it or not. We're attacking COVID first. So we're going to be submitting an emergency use authorization here in the near future for our COVID nebulizer, because we're finding that COVID is also attacking the natural killer cells, which is why we also believe cannabis is an incredible therapeutic, as it's hemp, for COVID, because it's turning those cells back on. It's boosting that immune system. And it's patients who have a broken NK cell system, who have pre-existing conditions that are succumbing to this disease. And patients that are succumbing to this disease that don't have a pre-existing condition, is our belief that they have a broken NK cell system and they don't know it. Humans walk around for years sometimes with a malfunctioned immune system, and disease, it takes a while for it to show up. And I'm sure everybody knows somebody who was super healthy, but all of a sudden got cancer, and there's no explanation for it. Well, it's because their natural killer.
No, that's really exciting that this research is finally coming out, and it can't be denied anymore. And the
I've lost you,
cures
Steven.
from a plant, and it doesn't affect, if any at all. Sorry, I lost you. But I was stating that I haven't found any side effects from taking the cannabis plant as well. And the last thing, we have about 1 or 2 more minutes. I want to touch base on what we talked about as the policy. I think that could be one of the big things that help open up the cannabis industry, hemp industry, is that this, I can only describe it as ignorant policy at this point, because the science is out there, the facts are there, and anything else besides it is ignorant. And I don't think we should entertain the conversations that we have to have around the regulations and research and around a plant that we've used for 10,000 years plus, for both food and everything else in between. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about, just for about 2 minutes we got, the framework of the work you're doing on the policy level.
So I have worked very closely with Congressman Eric Swalwell. He ran for president earlier this past year, and he is in Congress, United States Congressman for California. Wonderful human being, completely believes in medical cannabis. I visited DC and met with 6 other congressmen while I was there. And with Congressman Swalwell heading up the charge, he helped get a letter signed and put on the Attorney General's desk with 30 bipartisan signatures asking to deschedule for research. He, at the time, really wanted me to get in front of Speaker Pelosi and testify in front of the House and the Senate. I really didn't have the research ready yet, and I don't want to go up there with just anecdotal stories. I want to go up there with hard evidence and say, all right, here you go. We're proving that cancer is literally being eradicated. The cancer stem cells are being eradicated by cannabinoids, and it's fixing this part of our immune system. Let's open this up for research. So now that this research is going to be hitting the journals any day now, Eric and I have stayed in constant communication. I was just talking to him yesterday. I'm going to be going back to him. Joe Biden, our president-elect, has sworn that he wants to be the president that cures cancer. I have multiple inroads to him. I'm a phone call away from him through 4 different people. It is my goal to get into the White House with the new administration, who I actually do believe will help me move this plant forward, move cancer research forward, take my research, take my scientists, take my team at Encore, which is my new company, which is Nkore, if anybody wants to look us up. And I want to overturn this regulatory. And as a worst case scenario, get the laws changed so that we can at least do research. It's absolutely crazy that we can't bring cannabis CBD into a lab, THC into a lab, and study it. Hemp as well. We can bring hemp into a lab now, but even that is very challenging, being able to bring in the kind of whole plant hemp that we need in order to really be able to eradicate disease. So that's my goal, is to get back to DC, get into the White House, and really move these initiatives forwards with the most powerful people in politics today. And for those of you that are out there, get involved. There's all kinds of advocacy that you can do. Get involved with policy groups that help overturn policy that has been written on the state level and on the federal level. The states are a disaster right now. California's a mess. We need a regulatory across the board that is easy to operate under and that all people can participate in, so our black markets aren't thriving like they are here in California, because that's what's killing this industry, is the black market. And people being able to put medicine out there that should be seen as medicine with harmful chemicals in it and pesticides that can actually hurt patients instead of help them. So that's my path moving forward.
Beautiful. Yeah, and thank you so much for the call to action for people to get involved. And if they want to see this plant be recognized as a drug, they need to hear from us. So power to the people, the documentary, Lead the People. And thank you so much for all your work, Tracy, and we'll be in touch very soon.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye. All right. No pause in the action. We have the professor, we'll call him today, Derek Cross, professor of hemp, we'll call him. Derek has been an advocate, an educator, an enthusiast, a pioneer, a product producer, a curriculum producer, podcast producer, everything hemp. I think he lives this plant more than anyone I know. He even does hemp batteries. And I met Derek about 2 years ago. There you go. We hosted an impromptu conference in Vegas and invited like 25 of our hemp friends to the Bellagio Hotel, and we hung out for 3 days in Vegas just talking about hemp. And that's where I met Derek, and I've been turned on to all of this amazing work. He's the founder of the Hemp Academia, the Hemp Farm USA, Hemp Humanitarian Aid, the Hemp Chat. Derek's been a great resource for the entire industry, and that's part of our talk today, is how hemp can scale and how more people can get involved. And the 3 topics we're going to be talking about is education, in your history and education. We're going to talk about energy and innovation with the hemp battery, and then also talk about some of your products and how people can start manufacturing and getting hemp products made in their region. So before we get into all that, Derek, if you want to give us a background on your story of how you got into hemp and what brought you to now, and then we'll dive into those 3 segments.
Sure, great. Hey, Stephen, pleasure. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. Everything that you've been doing in the space, my hat's off to you. Hemp for the future is where we're going, you like it or not. Hemp is also, as you alluded to, it's been here in our past. So we're living in this time right now where it's here in the United States. It's been, the past 7 years, we've been making leaps and bounds, and so with companies like yourself, there's so many different things moving hemp forward, whether you're looking at cannabis, THC, cannabis hemp CBD, or hemp cannabis for fiber and fuel and food. There's so many avenues for this plant. It's one of the most sustainable crops on the planet. It's one of the strongest plant fibers known to man. and it provides so much for the people. And as we continue to move forward in the future, we're looking at plants like hemp. And you know, I found it many years ago. You asked how it came into my life, and it was primarily for my skin, looking for a non-pharmaceutical um, means to heal my eczema. Really small skin disorder in comparison to like psoriasis, etc. So I mean, not to be taken lightly, but we all have certain ailments within us, you know, and we got to find things that work for us. And you know, that's how I got really started, was the hemp seed oil, the cold pressed seed oil. So when you take that seed, you press it out, leaves the oil, and then the remainder is the protein powder. So you know, I got hooked on hemp back then, looking for a non-pharmaceutical way. And what do I mean by that? Well, steroid creams and et cetera were actually making my skin worse. So I was like, I'm not taking this stuff anymore. There's got to be a better way. So here we are with hemp. And then I was like, well, shoot, this is really working. So I always knew about hemp and cannabis as I was younger, but didn't really realize the powers in the healing with just hemp seed oil. And then learning about the plant nutrition, the omegas, the essential fatty acids, learning about this as a plant protein. And, you know, right there, we're getting smarter eating this food. We're reducing our needs to eat meat protein, you know, and fish protein. We can use this high in omega, balanced, well balanced 3, 6, and 9 essential fatty acids. And so when you bring that into the equation, you go, huh, okay, so my skin's getting better, my brain's getting better, I'm thinking more clear. What else can I do with this plant? So then I'm eating it, start making foods with it, learning how to cook with it, putting together recipes. And I'm not you know, I guess, you know, I'm not trained chef. I'm a self-taught chef, you know, and if you want to eat, you got to make things, you know? And so the methods using this in our foods was like, wow, okay. I started noticing some differences in my diet, you know, and running along down that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start advocating. I'm going to start educating. I'm going to start being an influencer out there. And so started taking the knowledge that I was learning and putting it forward. And this was, you know, 13 years past. And, you know, with social media, getting things like Hemp Healthy Today out there, starting to build media platforms, continue with the education. I live in Texas, but I advocate not only here in Texas, worked with legislation here, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Colorado, and Wisconsin, just to name a few. There's a lot of groups, you know, out there that have been influential into the governmental, you know, changes in legislation. And your past guest, Tracy, was mentioning about moving her initiatives forward as much as she can do with this. You know, we have to change the laws. But first, it all comes down to education, right? So we're opening the minds. And now, after Ryan Laughlin put the seed in the soil in Colorado 7 years ago, we've been opening minds all across the board. I mean, what used to be a really strict, let's use religion, Catholic and conservative or Baptist religion, never wanted, they had the blinders on. Don't talk to me about cannabis. It's an illegal drug, you know, but now we know it's more than that. We've always known it's been medicine, and it's in medicine in different forms, whether we're eating it for our food or we're putting it on our skin or using the THC or any which way. I like to say, don't just put it on you, get it in you too, right? So those are the things that just kind of set me off, and then you know, I'll take it from there and go.
Nice. Yeah, I like that saying, not just put it on you, but put it in you. That I'm gonna start using that catchphrase.
You have to. I mean, we're crazy about it, and you know, you do. So put it on you, not only on your skin topically, but put it on the clothes that you wear. You know, put it in the foods that you eat.
Love it, love it. And like you mentioned, with some of your work is in education, and I'd like to talk about hemp academia and the goals and the where you're at with that. Everyone I've kind of talked to today, I've asked them what's the main thing needed for this industry, and a lot of them have been saying education still. So, talk to us a little bit about your work in education and your curriculum that you guys have developed.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to. So going back, rewind about 7 years ago, coming out of the field, out of Ryan Laughlin's field in Colorado, that's where the education really starts, right? So when you plant the seed, you learn about, a little bit of the farming aspects of it. You dive into growing this plant. You learned, it's all been education about learning about what we can do with the product. So you're not only farming it, but teaching other people and expanding their minds. So hemp academia is basically gives you a general overview of hemp, kind of basic 101. And then my partner, John Patterson, also educates about building with hempcrete houses. And Tiny Hempcrete Houses is his website. And so, we're paired together and partnered to help educate people and get the information out there to whatever level they're at. And then we help consult into fields or bring it into our networks and then distribute other areas of expertise. So that's kind of the basis of hemp academia. And then when people want to learn how to build with the product, we educate about that. And we're an open resource for many avenues that people are just kind of getting in and they want to, make a call and how do I get started? Those types of things. So we help people. I've helped people. I've helped hundreds of people in this space, basically by inspiring them, and then the phone never stops ringing. And then, hey, I saw you had a tea company. I'd like to learn more. Can you help me do it? I want to do it for tea. So yeah, so we educate about different handling methods and how to try to get a product successfully to the market.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans to get hemp academia as part of an accredited college curriculum anytime?
So right now, that's a great question. Right now, we have it out on the web, and I'm in with higher education with some of our other companies that we do other innovations with. So yes, I have been in conversations with a couple of different accredited institutions to get this into their curriculums.
Nice, nice. Yeah, on a side note, I have a couple of connections I think could help with your amazing work. And let's move right along to the thing that I think is pretty monumental that you're also working on is energy production using hemp and energy storage via batteries. That's one of the things that was always very interesting to me is how you can make graphene out of hemp and use that for battery purposes. Talk to us a little about Eco Envision and where you're at with the battery production and some of your findings with natural based energy storage.
Yeah, so going along the path of education, you become an innovator. So you want to be able to open up. When when I used to do shows, and I still do, I bring away all my wares with. And unfortunately, I don't have the reddish color hair you do. But when I go on stage, I've been deemed the carrot top of hemp because I'm always pulling out these bag of things. So we're always educating, but we're always innovating because there's always something to do. And you bring up, let's always find what our why is. Why do we want to grow this crop? Why do we want to be a part of the industry? Why do we want to do certain things? Everybody has their own why. I'm a retired electrician. I ran my companies. I've come from a construction background and being into this space. So, in 7 years of doing research, well, more than more than 5 years on this one right here, and this is energy storage. But the idea didn't come from me; it came from Dr. David Mitland. Okay, so I want to give credit where credit's due. What we've been able to do with the technology is make. We have a patented process to make the material that goes into this, so we can use plants like hemp or canaf or other sustainable crops to make clean energy storage. So we will have by 2021, we have right now we're working on our prototypes using energy storage, and it's pretty amazing what we're doing in this space. I can't go into all the details, but it's really, when we get into energy storage and the race for energy technologies, we're looking at how do you make things more efficient, more effective. What do you do with them on a recyclability platform? What's their end use? And how can you make them extremely inexpensive? So the market has changed. We see energy in all forms, shapes, sizes, and how we're changing the future is extremely important right now. And it's going to take a course of a few more years. But as I've said, for the past 5 years, I've been working on this, and that's been one of my goals. And here, I'll show you. So it's really cool. I don't know if you guys can see on here, there's some residue. This is our, doesn't get much safer than that, right? So we're trying to make battery. We're trying to make batteries safer, longer lasting, faster charging, right? In the forms of using this in supercapacitors and hybrid energy storage technologies. So this is what we're working on. So at the end of the day, we urge you to recycle this in the best ways, but you know, we're dealing with very minimal invasive products on the interior here. So technically, if you threw this away, you wouldn't really be a detriment to the environment. So we're looking at safety, we're looking at heat, we're looking at cold. There's so many things we can do. I don't want anybody to necessarily throw things away, but we're taking it to the next level with what we're doing on the inside, you know, and making things safe.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I've even heard some people in the hempcrete space that have created formulas to where the walls will store energy like a battery as well.
Sure, there's everybody's playing around with different technologies. We've surveyed that. Obviously, we're doing things that I can't really get into on the back end of our prototypes and our technology, but those are the things that we're looking for. We're getting, like I said, we have the data. We're putting prototypes out there. We're raising capital right now to expand our manufacturing of our material, not manufacturing per se of battery or supercapacitor manufacturing at this point, because we're still in this early phase. But we have the data that supports what we're doing, and we're going to continue pursuing that data. But we need the equipment, and the beautiful thing is the cost, and that's at the end of the day. It's always about making energy cheaper and making it more accessible and getting it out to, you know, we're moving in that direction. If you look at automobiles, trains, planes, automobiles, right? We're doing that with handheld devices. So it's really cool what we got going on. So thank you for letting me highlight that. But that's what kind of really gets me out of bed. And it's always the innovations. And when you're working with a plant like hemp and or cannabis as a whole, that's what it is. But there's so many avenues people can go down. And that's why in the early education, you want to find your why. And then once we get that why out of you, we can help determine which path makes best, because it is grand forks across which avenue you're going to take this. And I think that's where we bring most benefit, to really steer people into their why. Some people don't want to be innovators, but they want to be farmers. Some people don't want to be farmers. They just want to be product manufacturers. So, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope
Great.
I didn't bore anybody on that, but we find
No.
energy storage really exciting.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be one of the things that really help get us off fossil fuels and create localized energies when you can make batteries, storage, and supercapacitors out of plants.
Yeah.
So,
The next
uh,
100 years looks great.
yeah, we're good. We're good. Don't worry about the last 100. It's in the past. Only a
We're gonna
moment.
fix that. We're gonna
Yeah,
fix that. We're gonna
exactly.
slowly do things here. But yeah. So I appreciate this really much. And if you have anything else to ask me, by all means
Yeah,
go ahead.
the last topics we're going to be discussing is manufacturing.
Sure.
You are you the founder of Hemp Sense USA?
No, I'm not. The founder is Lyle Bates up in Canada, and I'm partnered with him. I have been, once again, as long as I've been working on this, I've been partnered up there working with Lyle behind the scenes. Lyle is the creator of the animal bedding, the soil enricher, and the what else we got? Cat litter. Got so many things here, and then we have Pet Pro. We also have hemp seeds. We have all that in a bag of chips, so to speak. And so what we have is the manufacturing process, and this is done through a patented process. And taking the stock, which is a zero, hemp is a zero waste product, and that's kind of been Lyle's vision, my vision as well. So we've partnered, and I think you even see that same vision, right? So what else can we do with these waste products? Well, that's how it all got started. And when I can't speak 100% for Lyle, but I do know that these products are tried, tested, and true, and we're looking at getting them in and distributed not only here in the United States, which is our job here, but also globally. So we're working with wholesalers and retailers, and we're working with people that are wanting to take these products overseas right now too. So there's a lot of value in this stock, and that's going to help drive the industry forward. But I urge farmers not to overgrow like what we have seen in the CBD space. If you don't have a righteous plan, I would urge you to, with caution, to not grow and pile this up and expect the moon in dollars. We all have to remember these are well thought out business plans and models, and that these products are there to help support the communities, but it all has to be done appropriately. And over the past 5 years, that's what Lyle's been doing up there. And here in the United States, we're lucky enough to have the opportunity to take this business model and then move it down here. When we were on the conversation 5 years ago, that's kind of how we clicked, and it was always in that foresight. But first, they were getting their work done up there, and it takes a long time to get good products to market and be out in the competitive space. And that's another reason why I urge people not to just go and think you're going to willy-nilly this, because you just can't. And with our experience, with their experience, we're partnered really well. And it's the experience at the end of the day that helps create not only the products, but we have 11 products right now, and we're not stop innovating right now. We're looking into other avenues. I've mentioned some of the trades that I've been involved with, and that's all I can say.
Well, great. And so for the people watching, because hemp is almost each avenue is its own ocean of things it can create. So one of the goals is to inspire or have tangible action items where people can get involved in hemp. So if you have any advice for people watching on getting into manufacturing, whatever hemp product it'd be, hemp surfboard, hemp sunglasses, you name it, what advice would you give them to be able to start getting a product manufactured?
Well, everybody has to start with their vision. And once you establish your vision, you have to pair that with your mission. Once your mission is accomplished, and then you have to go and source material, you want to be able to work with entities that you align with so that you are, if your mission is the same as mine or very similar, well, that seems like a good partnership. You make a call and say, hey, Derek, hey, do you have how many tons of this material? And I can say yes or no, and we can work on a partnership that way. So I always urge people to lead out with their mission. And, Coach Freddie's also taught me that. And I owe him a great debt of gratitude for, explaining that in early business, and leading out with your mission is so important, as you know, Stephen.
No, I really appreciate that advice. I tell my two sons, I say, figure out what your passion is first. Find a way, combine it with your skills and your talents, and then figure out a way you can give it to the world, and then you'll never have to work a day in your life.
That's right.
And I know a lot of your work is for those exact initiatives, and it's inspiring to have you as a friend, as a colleague, as a mentor. I really appreciate our time spent together. And last thing I'd like to ask you is, as far as a blueprint for a better future with hemp, what are the best ways people can take action, and what do you feel is needed the most still?
Okay, that's a great question. So, what I'd like to include here is, after that last little tidbit, my mission is planting seeds of wellness for the people on the planet. So I urge everybody to go ahead and plant it, right? So that's part of the blueprint right there. Take that mission and what drives you when, I think it's Jack Herer said there's 25, 50,000 different uses of hemp. That's your blueprint. Find out your why, get to the next stages, start sourcing, do your due diligence on the products or the innovations that you're looking to make sure that this is the right material for you moving forward, and then look to see how you can get your product to market and what that takes. So that's part of the blueprint, into making sure that your business plan and your strategies are in alignment, and aligning yourself with the people that can help you along the way too. So you find people like myself or yourself or others in the space that have been here, have have been here for quite some time on these certain paths. That's a blueprint to success, is aligning yourself with the people that have a little bit more experience and in more of a role model mentorship. And if you have a business degree, and you've already been successful in business, then all you really need is the material and the mindset and some of the information to make sure collectively that you're on the right path to success. And that's basically the blueprint. And the long-term blueprint is the farmers being able to grow this and recognizing crop rotation and regenerative agriculture, getting that aligned with where the processors are, where the manufacturing is. So you would work with our groups and we would kind of help you in that section, aligning you with certain agronomists in your area, getting product to market, and then helping drive these sales and products to market, and really understanding the business model that you're going to present to the world. But we're on the path to sustainability and renewability. So the other thing you can take away from this, with these hemp sense products, is they bring extreme value. And in the regards to like this cat litter, I urge you to buy it once, use it twice, meaning go ahead and recycle it appropriately, throw it in the compost, because you're only going to add additional value to your gardens, or wherever you can dispose of this sustainably. And so we live in a throwaway society. So I urge you to throw it away, because we'll grow more. We're going to continue to trap carbon out of the atmosphere, provide
Beautiful.
oxygen, healthy products to the market. That's the blueprint, baby.
Love it. Planting those seeds needs. I really appreciate
Yeah.
your time and your work, Derek, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stephen, and enjoy yourself. It looks beautiful where you are.
Thank you. Hey, we have Professor David Abacassis. I don't see the eye patch. You're supposed to have an eye patch.
Well, I just I figured I'd wear the glasses and close an eye, and we'll just make do.
No worries. Welcome, David. We are live. We are hosting the Hemp Revolution conference today. It's a blueprint on how to make a better society and how hemp can play a role in that factor. And David and I have been friends and colleagues, mentors, advisors to each other for about a year and a half now. David's been an environmental scientist for over 20 years. He works in bioplastics, composites, nanotechnology, waste energy solutions, bioremediation, concretes, and anything from diapers to airplanes. And David is an innovator. He's got over 60 patents, I believe, now. And he also studies sustainable development goal macroeconomics and everything in between. And David, it's a pleasure having you here. And David's a founder of Titan Bioplastics, which is one of the entities we'll be discussing, and also the founder of Green Growers Technology Alliance. It's about a soil solution to increase root mass and plant growth. And yeah, your work in bioplastics is and nanotechnology, I think, is some of the most interesting stuff for a better future. But before we dive into those components, I'd love for you to give a couple-minute background on your work, and we'll kind of dive into some of the science components.
Sure. So I'm an interdisciplinary scientist. I'm extensively trained, a little bit in geology, a lot in chemistry, a lot in biology. I have a bachelor's in biochemistry from Paul Sabatier, University of Sciences in Toulouse, France. I have a joint master's degree from Rutgers University in biotechnology, industrial microbiology in particular, and then pollution microbiology and environmental science. After graduate school, I worked in diversified polymer consulting and did work ranging from work on some of the pioneering work in blocking out fluorescence in concrete. I also developed the world's first mass-producible organoclay. Was the inventor of that, the key inventor of that. And developed the first, most efficient, cost-effective process to remove nitrogen from cesspools and septic tanks and convert that into usable ammonia. I've also done pioneering work in nanocomposite materials for the last 20 years, and I'm continuing that work. Also, through our partnership with Titan, initially it was our partners initially with Titan Hemp, we got into sustainable materials in a partnership with what was originally a hemp group. And so we're taking our expertise in materials and product design and converting that into sustainable technology. So in the case of hemp, hemp, first of all, farming is one of the great causes of global warming right now. It represents something like 40% of the CO2 emissions. Part of that is the use of fuels, which is a little bit of it, but a lot of it is due to deforestation in particular, which contributes immensely to the planet's CO2 charge. So hemp is going to provide a solution, an environment, let's say an ecosystem solution in reducing the amount of hardwoods that are required for pulp and paper. It also greatly reduces fertilizer inputs where it's used, so you can use it as sort of the ideal rotational crop between crops. It also enhances the soil, and it increases the soil organic matter in particular. Now, hemp's been used, since really the beginning of civilization. However, now, because we have a lot of technology, hemp is the basis of a technology platform in the same way that petroleum was a basis for a technology platform. With the big difference being it's sustainable, carbon negative, and again, solves several different types of problems that are involved in sustainability. I addressed the first one, which is carbon emissions. It reduces carbon emissions as a crop. It reduces fertilizer, which in and of itself is produced using petroleum-based products typically, and so it's a healthier way to farm. But in addition to that, it produces highly nutritious food. We have about a 40% malnutrition rate worldwide. It's not all people that are just low on calories. There's also the hidden hunger of people that are malnourished. People that are obese, for example, are classed as malnourished. They have an unhealthy diet, and that has long-term consequences on the economy as far as their productivity, sick days, and also funds used for healthcare systems worldwide. So nutrition is going to be a key part of improving sustainable economies because it's such a drain on the economy when you have malnutrition. And so the hemp seed and hemp plant provides perfect protein. I mean, it's got all 20 amino acids. It's got very, very healthy fatty acids that are normally lacking in a lot of diets and the source of many ailments long-term when they're not. It increases heart health and it does a variety of other things, including reduces the levels of autoimmune system, things like psoriasis and skin issues. It attenuates the hyperimmune reflex of a lot of people as part of their diet. So there it offers tremendous benefits in both sustainable agriculture and in sustainable nutrition and health, which is a consequence of nutrition and is a huge economic factor. More importantly, as we switch from a carbon, petroleum-based economy as far as our energy, we're going to be electrifying the economy. And because of the limited amounts and pricing of conductive metals and elements, things like copper, things like silver, things like iridium, then graphene derived from cellulose inside the hemp is going to be more and more valuable as a part of the economy to carry energy, electrical energy, from the places it's made to the places where it gets used. And graphene, which is derived from graphene oxide, is the most electrically conductive material known to man. When I finished my graduate work at Rutgers, silver had that title. And since then, the discovery of graphene and graphene applications has greatly increased connectivity. It's the only material known to man that, if properly configured, is a superconductor at room temperature. Now, what does that mean? That means that whereas copper would have about a 15% energy loss if I was to use it to transport electricity, whereas this has no energy loss. And that extra 15% is very significant in the overall consumption of electricity. When you combine it with smart grids, when you combine it with low energy devices that also use graphene to reduce the rare earth metal loads in products, things like smartphones, things like other electronic appliances we use. Now we get more energy efficient appliances, also from a sustainable crop. And if we look at things like solar and solar electric, and then wind energy. So there are places in the United States that are optimally suited to harvest large amounts of piezoelectric solar energy, especially now that the solar energy, like all electronics, it's gotten more efficient and the cost has gone down. The problem is transporting all that power, electrical power, to places like Los Angeles or where it's needed. And so you have to transport this electricity long distances. And in normal technology, the present metal-based transport systems that we have, you lose a lot of that energy before it gets to be used. But using graphene, we can really reduce that by 15%. So in another example, the east coast of the United States is perfectly suited to harvest wind energy offshore. Again, the problem is collecting it all the way from Maine, all the way down to where you'd want to have it accepted, and then being able to transport that electricity to Boston, Washington, D.C., New York, and all the seaboard states that extra 15% of efficiency equates to a lot of electricity, and it puts less of a load on municipal energy grids. And all these things are derived from the hemp plant. In addition, hemp derived CBD and other types of cannabinoids that we're learning about have revealed themselves to be very effective preventative and acute treatment medications for a variety of ailments that range from neuropathy, mental disorders, bipolar disorders. It's an added technology booster to things like chemotherapy. It's been demonstrated that people take CBD before gamma ray and after gamma ray have much better outcomes from the gamma rays than people who don't. It's in certain cases been demonstrated to actually be able to replace chemotherapy in cancer, although the pharmaceutical industry is obviously freaking out over that for business reasons that are understandable. And more importantly than just about anything, it's a class of medication that has almost no side effects. And just name one drug commercial where, when the kid's hitting the baseball, they tell your head's going to fall off and all the other side effects. And there's very few medications that have as many benefits as hemp derived CBD and the other cannabinoids, but without really medical side effects. They act on their own endocrine system. They have their own portion of the neural our system, and so they have specific receptors. And the result is they don't really interfere with or block many other types of medications, and don't really have any overdose risks associated with the compounds, which is very unusual. And so this, again, is a derivative of this industry that should be helping to improve our medical treatment and increase our lifespan and quality of life as a class of drugs that really hopefully will displace opioids for pain treatment, which is a huge national epidemic right now, and a variety of other preventative things, including psychological disorders and a variety of other types of disorders. And so from that point of view, the spectrum of things that can be effectively medicated using cannabinoids is really incredible. In all cases, you're getting little to no side effects of any real consequence, which is unusual for any class of medication, including aspirin. You can die of overdosing an aspirin very easily. So this makes the hemp industry a platform for really a transformation of our economy in many different ways: economic, technology, financial, nutritional, and health. And these are all really cornerstones of a sustainable society and sustainable practice.
Wow. I think you just covered everything. That was very, very well rounded. Thank you. And no, it seems like with hemp that there's no drawbacks, not just with the medicinal side, but with everything it can produce. It can clean the soils. It can regenerate the soil. It produces a superfood. It's the strongest and longest natural fiber. You can make fuel out of it, plastics, and everything in between. And so I'd like to talk about some of your work in the plastic components and the single-use plastics, and your work on the plastic commissions and policy.
So right now, the chemical industry is getting well, like the auto industry, it's getting clobbered. There's a drop in consumer spending, and there's a drop in petroleum industry pricing, and all these things have really affected the chemical economy a lot. One of the few bright spots, and this is according to Paul Hodges, who's the American Chemical Society's economist, who I have a lot of respect for. Plastics and plastics recycling is the exception. And so what's happened is that studies that were done in Europe and around the world have shown that something like 95% of all the plastic you throw away on the street, bubblegum wrappers, whatever it is, will somehow through rivers, streams, estuaries, end up in the ocean. And there's a huge cost associated with that. So, a wrapper that may cost a penny or a fraction of a penny ends up costing $5 when they have to be fished out of the ocean using trawlers, for example. So we've done a couple things. One is in anticipation of these laws around recycling. We've been the first company to reintroduce nanotechnology as a commodity plastic recycling platform. Nanotechnology does a couple things for recycled plastic that are very great value. Prevents leaching from the plastic. That's a very big concern when you're recycling plastic. If you've left it in a garbage can, it's got mold on it, you're going to get mold toxins, going into food products or cosmetics if you recycle it. It's one concern. Right now, you can't use recycle for food, but the other thing is there's a glut of petroleum, but there's also a glut of plastics. And so Europe, in recognition of the problem this is causing, because we now have more plastic floating around the ocean than we have biomass, which is extraordinary. And also, plastic doesn't disappear in the environment; it keeps building up.
There's more plastic in the ocean than there is biomass from animals and plants.
That is correct. That is presently the situation, and so that's pretty dramatic. There are entire islands that have formed from agglomerated plastic off of Latin America that are just islands. I mean, I don't think their plants have started growing on them yet, but there's that much, and and then there's also, if these plastics break down over time, they get into small little microparticles called microbeads. Those look like food to small fish. They eat them. They get intestinal blockage. They die. So it's having an impact on biodiversity. It's harming certain species that are already endangered in environments that are already in stress. So all that adds up to a big environmental problem, and it's been turned into a regulatory compliance issue in Europe. Within another, I think it's year and a half, Europe has to go 90% recycled plastics. And there's plastics infrastructure in place, but there hasn't really been the recycle infrastructure in place and practices that go with that. So that's being developed. A lot of it all over Europe. I would say I've met institutes in Spain that are working on biodegradable plastics. There are Northern European countries that are really taking the lead, the Netherlands, Denmark, and places like this, taking the lead on recycling policy. So if you go to Rotterdam right now, there's a factory that can actually use laser infrared to detect the chemistry of a given piece of plastic and sort it with its own type of plastic. That's one solution. But what we're providing is the technology platform through nanotechnology that allows you to actually blend dissimilar plastics or plastics that would not normally process well together at all. And as a result, they're much more, it's friendly to lower scale equipment, municipalities that want to, recycle this plastic. It makes it a little less complicated. Also, for the purchasers of these plastic, they're actually going to be buying a high performance material in many cases versus the low grade commodity plastic they were expecting. This allows them to get into better markets and make better use of the plastic for what they're doing. Both at a processing end, cost end, and the ease of manufacturing with the plastic. So this is an enabling technology that should really boost the effectiveness, the market effectiveness of recycled plastics in the EU, and hopefully with the rest of the world following suit there as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. The next topic I'd like to talk about is the building materials section. I think hemp is primed to disrupt another toxic industry, extractive industry, the concrete. About 20 to 25% of the global emissions come from concrete production. And I know you're working on some solutions with hemp.
I just want to really finish a little bit about the plastic because it ties into the concrete. We've got a Danish partner called Plastics, PLSTIX, and they are fishing ocean plastic back out of the ocean, and we're transforming it into a nanotechnology. And with that, I'm going to go into the concrete. Part of it is because concrete are composites. There are different types of concrete, technical varieties, some that contain plastic for things like tectonically sensitive regions. So we are using hemp fiber, concrete, and a variety of other waste stream products that can include plastics, for example, to tailor design concretes for local use. And concrete has to perform differently in different environments. We're also doing some proprietary work that I can't really discuss right now that should drop the price of concrete by as much as 50% on the marketplace and still get a better technical concrete. Now, that's a huge windfall for a municipality that's trying to build infrastructure at a time when liquidity in the economy are not the best they've ever been. So we are doing, I guess, proprietary work that should be able to drop the price of concrete where we introduce this technology by 50% and actually get a better product.
You get a better product. You clean up the soil. You sequester carbon instead of emitting it, and you get a superior product and a better price. Pretty exciting stuff.
So one thing that I want to touch on that's going back to the energy portion of this is that the new era battery replacement technology is called supercapacitors. And supercapacitors have a huge advantage over present lithium ion batteries and other types of electrochemical batteries. Supercapacitors have a much lighter weight. They're actually built into the material, and they hold a kind of static charge like a rain cloud does. Hemp graphene will be critical as a raw material input to this industry. And this industry will transform how we use electricity, stored electricity in particular. So with a supercapacitor, for example, you'd have a much lighter weight Tesla that can maybe do, twice its present range because it holds so much more charge. In addition, supercapacitors can charge quickly and discharge quickly. So you could, top off your Tesla in 5 minutes. And if you floored the thing, maybe do 350 miles an hour down the LIE, meaning you can discharge all that energy very quickly. So that's an efficiency tool. That's an efficiency boosting technology that will impact the energy economy. And that's an additional output from the hemp graphene industry. And I just thought that was worthy of mentioning.
No, thank you. And so between plastics and building materials and energy and graphene and paper, where do you see the industry is going to be most adopted first for hemp production?
So I think the answer is regional. I think that while the logistics that are being put into place for hemp. Right now, hemp is in its early stage of industry. So unlike corn and soybeans and rice, which have huge, well-established value chains and computer control conveyor systems and logistics that have been perfected over a century, the infrastructure for hemp is evolving still. And so for that reason, I think that the introduction of hemp technology is going to be a regional affair as far as meeting demand. So the first thing I can see is areas where there's agriculture, introducing it to get a more sustainable agricultural practice, a lower cost of farmers. So areas of the country, Puerto Rico, traditional agricultural states are going to introduce hemp to basically boost the productivity of farming. I think the CBD market, because of the cost of the CBD, even with the drop in prices, which has been astronomical since I started buying it, is still a high value crop product and is going to actually fuel a lot of things besides that. I think once the graphene infrastructure is in place to a greater degree than it is now, then I think you'll see power companies stepping in to do more with that as they convert from being, let's say, a coal company to a graphene electrical company. And so each region of the economy has economic issues that are specific to that region. And so in order at this stage of the game today in 2020 to get hemp to really work, and I would say until 2023, 25, it's really going to be looking at local solutions that are both economic, environmental, industrial, agricultural, that are going to fit into the existing infrastructure. So I'd give you an example of caricatural adaptation. Let's say I'm going to New Jersey and I'm going to introduce hemp there. Well, New Jersey's got the largest biopharmaceutical industry in the world. It's got the largest concentration of pharmaceutical companies in the world. So it's going to be a big CBD market. It's also got a lot of technology. So certainly converting hemp fiber into graphene oxide with the largest chemical industry in the United States would be a perfect second, or first string market application for hemp. If I go to Indiana, on the other hand, there I've got traditional agriculture that's already in place that feeds the world. The problem I'm trying to solve there is not having to use synthetic fertilizer that cut into my bottom line, but also require a lot of inputs that are not environmentally sound. Also, I'm developing better markets for agricultural products. If I'm producing hemp for seed and fiber and for CBD, I'm getting a better market return for that farmer. So there I'm doing a environmental input service, meaning I'm reducing the amount of fertilizer. I'm increasing the profits of the farm. In New Jersey, I'm doing something that's more related to the infrastructure already there, which is petroleum refining and pharmaceuticals. And I think, if you were going to go to Michigan with hemp, you're going to be using it for composite fibers for things like automotive, trucking, and their traditional engineering, manufacturing-based businesses. So for the time being, the answer to hemp is going to be a regional answer. And I think it'll be regional governments and regional initiatives with some federal financing to help that are going to develop sustainable environmental and economic solutions for local markets.
Yeah, I really like the regional approach, because different regions are set up for different types of manufacturing. In North and South Carolina, they're heavy in cotton. In Wisconsin, they're heavy in dairy. You can make a hemp milk. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And I didn't mention to you, I went to a plastic manufacturer in Illinois by our facility where we're making gummies, and they actually make recycled ocean plastics as well. And they were very interested in converting some of their production into hemp and how it could even help create local jobs. So these larger manufacturers can also directly have a connection to their local economy and improve not just the economy, but the environment and the public health. So I really like that approach of look at what your region's producing now and figure out how to integrate hemp or plant-based solutions into it is the way to go.
So one of the things that we're working on at Titan Bioplastics is optimizing hemp fibers for their introduction into plastics as fillers, where we would normally use things like glass fibers or other types of fibers, elastonite, et cetera, mineral fibers. And that's because the inherent mechanical properties of the hemp fiber are the best in nature for a plant fiber. And so there's no reason to deconstruct that by dissolving it and making it into something else. We're big believers that the optimized fiber length as an additive into existing plastics, once you resolve the scorching issue and some of the stuff around the use of hemp and its thermal degradation, will actually be much more valuable as a sustainable filler material than as a raw material feedstock directly for the plastics.
Beautiful. Well, we have about 2 more minutes, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions. So, of all the things that you're working on, and what are the things that you think are going to scale the hemp industry, and the quickest, and what can people do individually to get involved and help the hemp revolution?
I would say right now the value driver is CBD and medicinal, simply because it's an economics of the cost of the product. It's a very valuable product, and it's got a high profit margin for converters and as a product. So I would say, buy more CBD products, if nothing else, for your own health, but also actively look for quality brands and quality labels in that marketplace. I think purchasing that, you're contributing pretty large revenue stream to the hemp industry indirectly. I think also, looking for hemp products that you'd want to purchase as a consumer. There are already some being offered for sale. And I think supporting any economy as being a consumer and just spending your money there is probably the best thing you could do right now. Third is, if there are any attempts to reduce the use of CBD by the pharmaceutical industry, then I would suggest write your congressman and advocate for reduced corrupt interference by competing interests, when really a lot of the issues ranging from veteran PST and homelessness and a lot of neurological issues and healthcare cost issues are directly addressed in each state by CBD. And I think there's a lot of understandable economic adversity from traditional pharma, which finds itself competing with something, like I said, without many side effects. It's hard to compete with something that's got high value applications and very few side effects. And I think that from a business point of view, I think that kind of scares the traditional industry. So there's going to be a lot of disinformation. And a great example was the Canadian Research Organization, which was a nationally funded organization that came out and said, hey, it looks like cannabinoids kill cancer. And then, 6 or 12 hours later, the Canadian pharmaceutical, no, it doesn't. No, don't listen to him. The reason is that the kind of money that goes into medicinal research is astronomical, and there's a very low probability of a successful outcome. It's a inherent mathematical quandary of the pharmaceutical industry, and it's very difficult for them to maintain profitability and grow in the present market environment. So when something as disruptive as CBD shows up, it gets a lot of the wrong kind of attention through the media and propaganda efforts. But I would say, as a consumer, you can look for hemp products, whether for their food products, but most importantly, health products from CBD. I think you would give the industry a huge boost right now.
No, that's great. I had a couple of guests say the same thing: is vote with your dollars. Start buying more hemp products, and then advocate to the government about not getting in the way of criminalizing a plant that is that has really no side effects for your body or for the planet.
Right, and farmers are still a big, important political force in this country, and I think they counter, let's say, the adversarial inherent interest of certain pharmaceutical industries that felt unfairly competed against by CBD and unable to capture it with competing products that have the same side effect profile. It's a very disruptive technology. But at the same time, I think farming is something Americans identify with, and certainly it's a new fracking for them. And
yeah,
you have to see it in that respect.
Yeah, and I really like how you talk about hemp as a technology platform, as a regional development platform, and I think the possibilities are endless, and we're in the beginning stage, and that's what's really exciting is seeing this all come together and putting all the pieces in place. And your work in the material science components and is going to play a big role, I feel. And I wanted to say thank you for your time today, David. And we'll follow up next week. And let that eye get better. If people are watching, David has been having one eye closed. He had an eye surgery the other week, and he's still recovering. But he made it for the show. So thank you, David. And up next, we got Miriam Rosham, Miriam Davidovic with Rosham Network. She'll be speaking about regenerative finance, impact, and how we can help get new financial tools into the hemp space. It's a pre-recorded video from last night, so I'll be signing off for the next half hour, and you'll see me soon. But David, it was a pleasure.
My pleasure, Stephen.
And we'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Stephen Cutter. I'm with Hemp for the Future. We are hosting an event today with David Cam and Miriam Davidchik with Rosham Hope Festival, and this about hemp revolution and how we can create new financial tools for the hemp industry to help with all the different regenerative practices. Welcome, Miriam.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, David. Great to be here with you two today.
And I got introduced to Miriam about 5-6 months ago through a regenerative ag partner at Regen Network, Christian Shearer. Both David, Cam, and I are heavily active in the regenerative ag space, including natural capital accounting. And Christian is one of the pioneers leading the space of tracking impact as well through regenerative actions. But Miriam and I have been connected for about 6 months, working on different ways that companies can get finance in the hemp space. It's a Wild West kind of area in hemp. Most people have been focusing on the CBD And I know with us, we've been talking a lot about the industrial hemp side, but you've been in the regenerative space for a while, the impact space and benefit corps. Miriam, if you could just tell us some about yourself, and then we'll go into how we can help create some of these tools for the world to adapt.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So what I'll do is I'll give you a bit of a narrative in terms of how we got to where we are today as Rushem Ventures and what we're doing in the hemp and regenerative agriculture space. So Rushem Ventures is an impact investment management firm based in Israel. And through that firm, we manage a portfolio of investments into infrastructure and regenerative agricultural projects. That infrastructure portfolio is primarily based in Serbia. And we also have regenerative and organic agricultural initiatives in Serbia, whereby we manage a certified organic farm and over 100 hectares of agricultural land that we're managing in accordance with regenerative principles, and where we also have a license to grow industrial hemp. And we're working on weaving that element of growing industrial hemp into the commercialization piece around hempcrete and building with hemp. So the way that we're doing that is, in addition to financing and managing the growing piece around industrial hemp, we're also financing the establishment of a rural innovation center here in the village of Zlakusa, Serbia, where I am right now. And that rural innovation center will be managing education around impact measurement and management, impact finance, organic and regenerative agriculture, as well as hemp processing. So the processing of hemp for hempcrete and hemp building applications, as well as the processing of hemp for wellness products, including hemp oils for cosmetics and for nutritional applications, hemp oils, and also the element of processing food in general, so organic food processing outside of hemp as well. So that will all be done through the Rural Innovation Center here. And as a impact investment management firm, we're also in the process of raising a impact investment fund that is currently establishing a pool of capital for both impact technology and regenerative agriculture, as well as innovation and infrastructure related to how we can commercialize the impact focused technology and also the agricultural products. So our new fund is called the Shefa Regeneration Fund. It is domiciled in Canada, and it manages a portfolio of benefit companies in Canada, as well as benefit corporations in the US. For the commercialization of both hemp applications for sustainable development, impact technology, and then also the international pieces that I mentioned previously. So that's what we're working on now, and I'm happy to take any questions around how it works in practice and how it can benefit entrepreneurs in the hemp space as well.
Great. Yeah, I'd like to touch base on the rural innovation centers. That's one of my passions too. I think it's one of the ways that innovation can be sparked in this space, which is desperately needed, and also community development around local projects. I know you'd like to focus on local issues as well. So I know on the incubator front, I think I'd like to talk about, what kind of companies are you looking for, and what kind of things that are you looking for in the companies to help them along.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So in terms of our incubator and accelerator, what we've started doing is we've supported Israeli technology companies in the hemp and medical cannabis space, particularly focused on wholesale trading and also on stakeholder engagement. So one of the companies in our incubator was first supported in developing a stakeholder engagement platform, which is a social network to bring together hemp industry stakeholders to explore topics such as the Sustainable Development Goals, impact measurement and management, impact finance, and how hemp companies can implement best practices from the impact measurement and management and the impact investing space into how they do their work, so that they can then qualify for impact investment from institutional funders as well as aligned impact investors. So we ran a pilot project this year to incubate and accelerate a couple different companies, and that went really well. So we were able to then support those companies in raising capital for their growth and scaling out of Israel into Serbia, so that we could take what was a technology company, develop that stakeholder engagement platform that I mentioned, and then weave it through with on-the-ground initiatives related to organic and regenerative hemp production, our Rural Innovation Center. And then based on the success of that, we then helped those companies scale to the US and Canada. So we're looking to replicate that model and find